Hello, and welcome.
Oh, I got railroaded.
Yes.
Help.
Well, now that you counted down, before, ladies and gentlemen, he would play the theme song. Now he's adding the theme song in.
Yeah.
So now I know when we start.
Because it was so easy, then I just needed to put things in different tracks without actually having to, just time things. But it's now easier.
Yeah.
Now I found a different way of my workflow, so it's okay.
So but now I know when we actually start the podcast, because before I would just sit there until you said go.
Yeah, because he couldn't hear the music. I could hear the music.
I know.
I was always quite excited. But anyhow, you hear the music, of course. So yesterday I was actually at a dinner with a friend from Germany who's here on vacation in the Banyan Tree Hotel, and he actually wore the what is it called? The zombie? No, the Guinness. He has the GMT Master 2 two-tone Jubilee bracelet that I had before as well and sold when I got my Daytona. Yeah, the Guinness. Yeah, Guinness, exactly.
Yes.
And I realized how much I really like it.
No, the Bruce Wayne. Bruce
Wayne is the steel one.
Oh.
The steel version.
They have different names for different colors?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. The Guinness, is it the Guinness? Yes, it's the Guinness. Yeah. The black and silver, right? The black and gray.
Yeah, it's black and gray and of course two-tone. Yeah, and I realized that I really think this watch is really, really cool. I still like it a lot. I would like to have it back one day. But most of the Rolexes I once owned, I really would like them back. But you can't have them all.
That's really funny that you mention this, because I do feel that I don't know if I'm the opposite. When I've made decisions to sell something, okay, obviously I do buy a lot of stuff back, so I don't know if I'm legitimate with this, but be quiet. I have, the Rolexes, specifically the Rolexes that I've sold. And this is kind of what prompted today's talk as well, is I sold my sub that I had since 2018. So it was like a 7-year-old watch that I've been wearing. And I wore this back when I had 2 watches. So I wore the hell out of it. And the fact that I decided to sell it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk about today is kind of why I chose to do this and what I replaced it with and what other replacements are available for people that don't want a sub, are tired of their sub, or are bugged by a sub. And we'll call this a one of, series, because I think there's a good amount of watches that we could do do this kind of thing with, where we talk about alternatives for specific watches.
Yes, for sure. So
now, before I want to say one more thing. So for instance, ignoring the sub, we talk about the sub today, but for instance, I sold the Datejust, right? Partially because you said, why do you have this watch if you hate date windows? And I said, you're absolutely right. Why do I have this watch if I hate date windows? And it didn't do anything for me, right? It didn't kind of offer some value in some way. So therefore, I looked at replacing that as well, right? And if I were to get a Rolex, I was thinking then, of course, I want an OP, but then the OP is too similar to my Explorer. Or maybe I get a birth year Datejust to replace it with, right? So the question is then, when it comes to Rolexes, we always have this kind of rose-tinted glasses when we look back on Rolexes. For some reason, we don't do it with other brands, but with Rolexes, we're always like, I should replace it at some point or get this one back.
Because there's always one thing that you remember, which is that they just felt so comfortable on your wrist.
Good. Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it could be. It definitely could be.
They just wear so well. But in the same vein, I have like my 56, for example, right? The Vacheron Constantin 56. I always feel like that's, even though I have the overseas now, I still think that the 56 was wearing so well, especially with the bracelet. It was just so comfortable to wear, right?
But that one had micro adjust, right? So the micro adjust on that bracelet was weird. It was from both sides of a butterfly clasp.
Yeah,
which
same
cool.
as the overseas. Yeah, it's really nice. But it was just feeling so well. It was so well made, and it's only available for that specific 56. It's a different bracelet, much smaller and lighter than the flatter, let's say this than the overseas one. So it's also a very, very comfortable watch to wear. So I think sometimes this is one of the things where you feel like, okay, maybe that's why we like it. I mean, one thing is because it's a Rolex, which has always some kind of pull.
I think that's what it is, because I honestly do believe we can talk our way. Oh, it's the bracelet. Oh, it's the movement. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. I think it comes down to the fact that it's a Rolex.
Yeah, but I still have Rolex. It's not that I don't have a Rolex.
But we want all the Rolex. That's what it comes down to, right?
We want them
We're
all.
Still kids at heart, and we just want all the Rolex, right? Because why not?
Yeah.
But why does Rolex have this grip over us, but other brands don't?
And it's funny because usually when we started, we both were not necessarily Rolex fans, right? I mean, with
no. I started and I loved Rolex and I couldn't afford it. So then you convince yourself that, oh no, Rolexes are for the stupid people. They're the ones that want to spend more money. But look, I can buy an equally good watch for much, much less. And then you say, okay, after a while you say, okay, I'll buy a Rolex. See what the fuss is all about. And then you buy a Rolex. And then you're like, oh, I understand what all the fuss is about. Then you're a huge Rolex proponent, right? Then you're the freaking poster boy for Rolex. And you love it. And then all of a sudden, after a while, you're like, maybe I overdid it with the Rolex. And then you can kind of go back down to having one in your collection, right? And that's kind of where we are now.
Yeah, that's true. But, just recently, we talked about Rolex being made in China, right? And these TikTok videos that came out. There's even more now. Now it's all over YouTube as well, not just TikTok. It's everywhere. Everybody is talking about this. Is Rolex made in China? What does Rolex say? What should Rolex do? And so many people are saying, oh, the reputational damage is crazy, and it will be just terrible for them. I always think it's, they have been around for 100 years. There have been so many rumors. It's just water off their backs. They know it's a fad. It will go away. But I think now Rolex is, they're not suing anybody yet. They're not, and so many people are saying they have to make a statement. They have to prove to us that it's right. And I always feel like, okay, this is the typical burden of proof fallacy. You don't have to prove something just because somebody claims it. The person who claims it has to prove it. It's not just that and I'm saying like, and Martin is a thief. And then I tell everybody tells you that you have to prove that everything you own is not stolen. And you think like, no, I don't have to prove this. You prove to me that I stole something because I'm not going to.
And then we go from there. Exactly.
Yeah. But this is the thing. It's everybody thinks that Rolex has to now respond. And I think like, no, if they start responding, then they have to respond to every idiot who claims something on the internet. No. And especially Rolex is not going to do it.
And especially, what's it called? These trolls on the internet, right? That are poking holes in things just for the sheer sport of it, right?
Yes.
And then this is the other funny thing is, and I love when these people do try to prove something.
Yeah.
So recently, this is a random aside. I was on Instagram and I somehow got into a reel, and it was a Hungarian auto, dealer, like a new car. It was a Peugeot salon, right?
Okay.
So it was a Peugeot dealer, and it was this girl. I mean, she was a salesperson, clearly maybe 22 years old.
Yeah.
And she said with such tenacity, she said, you need to forget about all of this rumors that you've heard about Peugeots being unreliable and French cars being bad. If French cars were bad, we wouldn't have opened a Peugeot salon. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So just because we made a stupid decision, everybody should buy a Peugeot. Like, okay. So then when you see this kind of blatant claims, straight to the comment section, right? Somebody has to. First comment was, I am a service technician for the Peugeot Citroën group, whatever they're called. And I can confirm they are in fact terrible cars. They're terribly designed. They're mechanically terrible and no one should buy them. And I'm like, Exactly. So the salesperson is just told to sell the car.
Of course.
But the guy on the back end who's actually fixing them, and then you give like a laundry list of examples of like simple fixes that should be simple, but Peugeot for some reason made it extremely difficult to fix, right?
Yeah.
And this is what they're known for. The French are known to make these little, like for instance, does the Renault Megane need 4-wheel steering? Absolutely not. Like there's no way in hell.
But how are you navigating a car that size without 4-wheel steering?
Exactly. Like if it was a freaking, tank, I would understand. But a hatchback.
Now, if you put yourself into a small French city on the countryside that has the roads built 1,500 years ago.
100 years
when
ago.
When there were just horse carriages and people walking. Then you might think, it could be nice if you had the tiniest turning circle or something. But yeah.
But at the end of the day, people have managed with much larger cars than a Megane for I don't know how long. So it just doesn't make sense.
Look,
just one more thing to break.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have this with German cars as well, who are sometimes completely over engineered. Or like in my car with the V8 engine, Touareg, the one that was special for the Middle East and Brazil and I think Russia, I think they did it. When everybody had the fuel-saving V6 engines, we got the V8. So it's a really cool car, 360 horsepower. I love it. But they have put this TSFI thing in it, and this has the timing belt on the back of the engine, not on the front. Yeah. So if you need the timing belt change, you have to take the whole engine out.
You know who else did this? Ferrari.
That cost a lot of money. And everybody will ask you, why on earth would you want to do that, right? It is sometimes, it's incredible of how decisions are made for engine design that made very little sense for manufacturing. I don't know what the benefits were. I mean, it's really tough. Maybe size, maybe that would fit it into smaller space. I have no idea.
That's 90% of the time it was to fit it into a smaller space, but then they don't think about that fact that somebody is going to have to do a timing belt change.
And see, that's one of the things that every watchmaker in the world always applauds Rolexes, because they're saying it's a joy to service a Rolex because it's made to be serviced.
Yeah.
It's not made to look cool or be nice or, do super fancy things. These things are designed to be robust and to be easily serviceable, because Rolex produces so many.
Long.
Yeah, exactly. And Rolex produces so many watches that they know how many they have to service eventually. And then that's why they focus so much on efficient servicing, because it's their problem.
Or better yet, not, because the thing is, and this is what car companies need to understand as well, right? Just because you put the timing belt at the back of the engine bay and have to remove the entire engine, right? Think about, going back, Ferrari, the 355 had the same issue. In order to do a timing belt change, you had to drop the entire engine.
Yep.
Okay. The 355 was then superseded by the 360. In the 360, they learned from their mistakes. And they put behind the seats a firewall that was removable so that you can get to all of those components. So that is simply, it's one thing that was done specifically for maintenance, right?
Okay.
So in these kinds of things, right, like that means that they cared about maintenance in some aspect. I don't know why, obviously, but in these cases, they're not the ones maintaining it. And I don't know how many % of people go back to the main dealer for maintenance, maybe 50%, other 50% take it somewhere else. But then for their 50% that they are helping, right, they can still charge the same price that they charged before, because they're not lowering their prices, right? A timing belt change then was, let's say $5,000. Now it's still going to be $5,000, but you do it in a quarter of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're saving time for your mechanics.
100%.
So I think this is, when we say about easily maintainable, I think this is selfish for in this case, for Rolex.
Yeah.
And for
selfish
the maintenance for the cars, because they want to do it
But it benefits you as a customer too.
Of course it does. It does.
That's why
so in this is once again, form follows function, right? It's the function of what you're doing that is then going to offer some benefit to the owner and to the seller.
But it might make, for example, then your movement not as attractive, because you might put some pieces that are usually looking nice to a transparent case back in places where you can't see them, or whatever it might be, right? So there's always a trade-off. And that's why I think sometimes you have brands that look fantastic, look amazing, are hand-finished like crazy. But if you want to service it, you are paying $3,000, $5,000, like a complicated Lange, right? The Zeitwerk, for example.
It's going to be crazy.
You're going to die when you get your bill, right? So it's really like, oof. And the cost of an entry-level Rolex to service that watch, right? So, but then it is just a different ballgame there, because you're buying an horological super marvel and not just a tool, right? In this case. Talking about tool, let's go into the topic at hand. What would you replace your Submariner with? Or what did you replace the Submariner with?
Yes, exactly. What did? And we need to talk about the mentality of why I did it. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. So I had my 114060, which was the maxi case Submariner with the ceramic bezel for 7 years. And when I bought it because it was the Submariner, right? That was the main reason. I said, this is the quintessential watch. This is the watch that everybody thinks about when they think of watch.
Yes.
Exactly. So I said, okay, I buy. And then over time, things, I wished things were a little bit different. First things first, I hated the ceramic bezel. The reason is the ceramic bezel that's on that watch is so shiny. It is just, basically like a polished diamond, right? It just shines light in every single direction. So that was kind of a pain in my ass. Secondly, the dial matches that as well. Super shiny. Everything is like just reflecting light constantly. And that I just didn't like. It much like the Omega Seamasters with the ceramic bezels and the ceramic dials.
Yeah.
They're just so shiny, so flashy. So that was one thing. Then the second thing was the maxi case itself, right? Those lugs, they were they're atrocious. When you look down at the watch, you don't see one cohesive unit. You see a square. And then out of that square comes the bracelet, which just some reason it just didn't sit right. And I was always comparing it to the older Submariners, the previous generation, the 14060, because I think that is an absolute stunning design. So being that I don't have any vintage watches, I don't know if I want to go in and buy vintage watches. I think, it's a landmine to go into vintage watches because, polishing, servicing, real parts, fake parts, blah, blah, blah. I was like, I just don't know. So I have, and today, of course, we didn't do wristwatch check for this specific reason.
Yes, exactly.
Because I have replaced my Submariner with two watches, not one, but two. And the thing is, I didn't know that these two together would fill every single possibility that my Submariner, or do everything that my Submariner did, right?
Okay.
So the first one we had for a while already, which is of course, the Black Bay 54. And I loved the fact that this is a small little diver. It had an aluminum bezel, which I love the aluminum bezels. And it had, a lug to lug of 47 millimeters, 37 millimeter case size. You put it on a NATO strap like I did, a gray NATO. It's fantastic. It's extremely thin. The side profile is absolutely wafer thin. It's super cool. But of course, it gives you that vintage sub vibe. And I'm like, but I do like the modern sub vibe as well. So I was thinking I would really like a modern dive watch. Well, in comes the Pelagos 39, which Ralph here sold me. And these two together have done more for me than my sub ever did. So titanium, I love the dark gray of this titanium. Once again, ceramic bezel, but the ceramic bezel is now matte.
I know that is it? That I think it is not ceramic. I thought this was
it is
aluminum. No?
Yeah, exactly. It's ceramic.
Really?
So it's ceramic, and it's a brushed ceramic. So it looks, it's kind of like an aluminum bezel, but it is still ceramic. And of course, huge lume, loomed bezel as well. The titanium is fantastic. So these two watches together, they are essentially what a Submariner should be and what a Submariner was. And both of these together, I would take the smaller one, for instance, on vacation. If I'm going in, so they're both fantastic vacation watches. I took the Pelagos to Cyprus. You're on the beach. It's perfect. But if you're not going to the beach, you're going to a city, then the Black Bay 54 is perfect for that because you could dress it up, dress it down. Yeah. It's still sporty enough, waterproof. So it does everything. So I was looking at a poll on Watch You Seek from when the Pelagos 39 came out. And it said, what should I get? And it was vintage sub, new sub, or Pelagos 39. And the votes were 44%, the highest in this ranking for the Pelagos 39. So it seems like and there was like something like 300 votes on this. So compared to the vintage, the modern, and the Pelagos won out by double that of the nearest one. So it's not just me, but other people are seeming to think that the Tudors are the way forward. The Tudor is what, the tool watchness of Rolex used to be, because now Rolex has gone into just making fancy, luxury things.
I think that's correct. They have replaced that tool niche a bit with the Pelagos line, at least, right? So for sure. Yeah.
And one more thing that I didn't notice until today is on the sub, I didn't like so I love graduated bezels, right? Like the FXD that has the hash marks all the way around, right? On the sub, you have it only into the first 15. Yeah. On the Black Bay 54, you don't have any. Now, on the Pelagos, for some reason, my eyes seemed to like this for some reason. I didn't know why, but it looked cleaner on the Pelagos than on the sub. So if you look on the Pelagos, you see the hash marks for the first 15 minutes.
Exactly.
What is missing that the sub has?
I don't know.
The sub has the number 10.
Ah, okay.
And here, the graduations are full to 15 with no numbers.
Okay.
And the numbers only start at 20 and move forward. And for some reason, this now balances the weight of what is on the bezel somehow for me.
Okay.
Meanwhile, on the sub, you squeeze in that number 10 in between those hash marks, and it looks too complicated, too busy. So that's something I learned today as well. And ID guy made a video today about the new Pelagos Ultra, and he apparently does not like this. He said he's missing the 10. So apparently,
interesting.
He said the 10 is missing.
See, I have two alternatives here in my hand as well with diving bezels. But what I wanted to say about replacing a Submariner, it doesn't mean you have to have a dive watch, right? It just has to replace the Submariner-ness to you.
So yes, but then the Submariner-ness can be defined in multiple ways.
Exactly,
some people buy a Submariner because it's iconic and it's luxurious.
Yeah, and it's
other
not
people
actually
buy it because it's a tool watch.
Yeah, but it's not actually a proper dive watch. In this case, that it's called a diver's watch, right? Like on the dial, like
only the date one cannot be considered a diver's watch.
Even the non-date, the normal Submariner, let's say it this way, so it might be ultra correct, doesn't have the diver's nomenclature on it.
But it doesn't need it. So diver's nomenclature doesn't have to be there. If you're ISO certified, you don't have to put divers.
True.
But in order, if you want to put divers,
you have to have the ISO.
To be. Yeah. So except for Oris, who decided to say just diver and got away with it, which is absolute freaking nonsense. How they got away with that is ridiculous.
Yeah. So let me say what I have here as a replacement. First of all, the one that I'm actually wearing right now, which is now on an orange strap at the moment, this is the Luminor.
So I knew you would bring this, and this is why I think this is absolutely a sub alternative.
It has no bezel whatsoever, no markings on the bezel, so you cannot time anything with it, right? But it has a crown guard and it has 300 meters of water resistance. And it's very easy to read the time, but you don't have a timing bezel. Now, that's one of the choices. That's what I'm saying. It's not a diver's watch. It was developed.
It is a dive watch.
It was developed for divers, but it's not a diver's watch as in the technical
anymore.
term.
Because we have to remember that not the Submariner, the Blancpain was kind of the quintessential design for what a dive watch was. Panerai came before that. So when the Blancpain, which we'll talk about in a little bit, was developed, that became the quintessential dive watch look. That's what the Submariner went with. That's what the Seamaster went with. And everything following that kind of stuck to this.
Number 2. In my collection is the Seiko 62 or 65 Mas re-editions. You have a fully, the entire bezel is indexed and also has the numbers, but it's just a proper diver's watch. It has divers on the dial, so it has the ISO certification. It has a very slim profile because it has this mid case, super slim. It's even slimmer than the previous version of it, so it wears absolutely lovely. It's 40 millimeters, so it wears like the Pelagos 39. So it's a beautiful watch. $1,000 gets you that, sometimes even on discount a bit less. That's basically what you pay for that. Second, I have one which is this Norqain. It's not a diver's watch, 100 meters water resistant, screw down crown, but it's more like an adventure watch, right? It's more like
it's what we call dive style watch.
It has 42 millimeters, so it's a bit bigger, but it wears pretty nice because it's very slim. But there you go. I mean, why I mentioned here the Seiko and the Panerai first, because they have also similar specs from the movement, 70 hours power reserve. The Seiko has a date, the Panerai has a date as well with the Luminor, but even there you find Luminors without the date, without the small seconds if you like. So that's that. And then with the Norqain, I think this is just a adventure style watch. There's just the entire stick, more or less, right? Adventure, sports, these kind of watches for active lifestyle people. And that's why I think it's a good alternative for Submariner, because you save money and you have a very high quality watch. I want to mention one more, and this is the traditional, at least for people who are in the hobby for a long time, the traditional opponent of a Submariner were two. The Super Ocean from Breitling, and of course the Omega Seamaster 300 meter. So these were
I'm
the
going to say no for the Super Ocean. I don't think the Super Ocean was. I think the Omega, yes, the Omega was always
in the old times. It was
yin to the yang.
It was black dial, bezel, much higher water resistant rating than the Rolex. It was always like minimum like 500, 600, 1,500, whatever. Right? They had higher ratings there. They were even competing with the deep sea and the Sea Dweller and stuff like that. From the water resistance rating, from the automatic helium escape valve and what have you. Nowadays, I think they're a bit more into the fashion realm. The Super Oceans went a bit too funky, too many colors and all of this stuff. We do have to mention that also the Submariner comes in a plethora of different dial colors. You have blue, you have green, you have black. And I think that's it. Oh,
three colors.
No meteorite. 3 colors? Okay.
No meteorite.
No, that's not.
And
that's GMT Master.
No, you still have blue. You're right.
But I also want to say that not only there are outside competitors to that watch, they're also inside competitors, right? So an Explorer 2, an Explorer 1 can replace a Submariner in certain cases as the everyday tool watch. If you want a diver's watch, there's the Sea Dweller, right? If you want a bit more of that. And there's also the GMT Master, which looks very, very similar on the first glance to any sub.
Yeah.
Just have not a diver's watch, but a GMT Master watch, but has the entire dive watch look, right?
It does.
So,
and this is something that I'm always a little bit confused about, because I think the GMT Master 2 and all GMT Masters since the inception, has somewhat of an identity crisis. Like, what are they? Are they, this whole, it literally is a copy paste of a Submariner. You put some colors on the bezel and then you call it a day. And that's why I do admire
right? The black one with the black.
Oh yeah, the original black ceramic one didn't even have that. Yeah. So I do admire when someone, and I think a lot of people are doing this now, because of course a lot of people followed Rolex in their footsteps and just said, we make GMT as well. We take our dive watch, we make it look like a GMT watch.
Yeah.
But when somebody like Grand Seiko or Seiko in general does something different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they do a GMT, but they just upend the entire look of what these GMTs are.
Yeah.
One of the ones that always comes to mind, of course, is the Moser dual time you used to have.
Yes.
That was such a brilliantly beautiful way of displaying a second time zone in that red hand that matched the dial, and you see it sometimes, you didn't see it other times. It's fantastic, right? There's no need to keep copying the Submariner design in GMT watches.
I agree.
And then, of course, it has 100 meters water resistance, which is more than enough for anything. But at the same time, I'm like, you could have done more.
Yeah.
And I think, of course, this was a marketing ploy. Right? There's no way in hell that they had that same case and then they lost 200 meters of water, resistance magically with the same screw down crown, with the same, everything. It just doesn't really make sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So I would hazard a guess that your GMT Master 2 can go diving, but who knows?
Yeah.
Now, okay. All right.
I just want
to
show one more, the Grand Seiko Sports collection.
Yeah.
There you have a watch that looks so similar to a Submariner. It's not even funny, right? You have the crown guards.
Yeah.
I mean, look every diving watch looks like a Submariner nowadays, more or less, right? To a certain extent. But there you have markings all around. You have the big Lume plots. You have the weirdest hands. And of course, in this case, you have a spring dive so that you have a power reserve indicator on the dial. You also have a quartz version of that, right? If you wanted to. Just the only thing that they do a bit differently from Grand Seiko is that they're usually quite big, right? They have.
I don't know why they're all so big.
Yeah, I think there's one now coming out with a 42 or something. Because the old ones are
44 plus.
44.2.
Lug to lug 51, it says.
14 millimeters thick with only 200 meters water resistant. There's no reason you have to have 14 millimeters for 200 meters water resistant.
Yeah.
It's just not, it makes no sense. You have here this little Seiko, which is a diver's watch as well, right? I mean, this is a Seiko. So, I mean, they obviously know how to do it.
Fancy. Your Seiko is fancy compared to a Seiko,
the Grand Seiko,
SKX, for instance, that was peanuts. 200 euros, 800 dirhams would buy you one on Amazon, and that had 200 meters water resistance. And it was an actual screw down crown dive, ISO certified dive watch.
Yeah.
And so it shows you that you do not have to have something expensive to become or to have a diver's watch.
And the cool thing,
yours, the thing is, yours is already the 62, 65 MAS reissues are kind of diving back into the olden ways, right? Because the crown guards are a very big telltale sign that this is a vintage reissue, because
it's not really a crown guard. It is just a bit sunken in.
No, I'm saying yours does not have a protruding crown guard, right?
Yeah.
Because, of course, it was, in the 70s or something, that crown guards started making an appearance.
Yeah.
Because, of course, it was a more complicated case design. It took more machining to do. It cost more money, more time. But it was functionally a necessity. So if you wouldn't, whack your watch on something while you're diving, you wouldn't accidentally rip the crown off.
Yes.
So these are functional advancements. So therefore, why would you go backwards? That's my kind of idea with these dive watches is, yes, we have vintage reissues, but then we have the modern ones. And I feel Rolex has stagnated this, the Submariner. They have not moved forward. Their entire idea of moving forward was, let's slap a ceramic bezel on it, and that was it. Meanwhile, Tudor said, let's make it in titanium. Let's do this. Let's put full Lume over the bezel. And that is the continuation of what the Submariner should be in its heart.
I agree. I think this is one of the things that I like about the watches like the Seiko, that it's might be a retro design with modern twists, of course, with modern machining and all of the technologies that you have now. But this, and the drilled lugs, of course, right? But
drilled lugs are fantastic.
But this is why I think this watch is so cool, because the diver's certification, the ISO certification, does change. Not very often, but from time to time it changes. For example, now they have changed the rule that you have to have all indices with luminous material. So
every 5 minutes.
That's why they moved the date, right, here to 4:30.
And if you look back at SKXs, by the way, that had Divers 200 written on the dial, yet it still had a day date.
But so because at that time, the ISO was not updated. And now, so here also the second hand has a Lume plot, because now the ISO certification requires you to have a physical indication that the watch is running. Right?
Exactly.
So you have to have a loomed second hand to show that the watch has power reserve, that it works. And because an automatic watch will automatically, once it runs because you're moving, especially when diving. So it will not stop, right? Which is very important. And that's why, for example, the quartz versions have to have end of life.
Wrong, if it broke.
Yeah, correct. So yeah, I think that's the thing that Rolex doesn't do anymore, because they're not following this ISO rules.
They're still following it for the Submariner, just not the Submariner date.
Yeah, but is the second hand loomed? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Is it?
There's a Lume circle.
Okay. Yeah. So that's why I think it's nice to have these divers style, or not style, divers watches, real divers watches, because you have the benefit. And so also, what Rolex also does with all of their watches is the actual water resistance is tested to, I think, 25%.
25% more.
Which is the divers rule, that you have to do 25% above the initial stated water resistance. So it's also in the ISO specification that when you say 200 meters, you have to test it to whatever, 235 or whatever it is, 25% plus. Sorry, I haven't done the calculation. 250, 250 meters.
250 it would be.
Not very hard, actually. I just realized.
It is not, but...
So the 250 meters has to be tested to withstand 250 meters if you want to put 200 meters on the dial. So this is the good thing. It's not like with all the other watches doing their rubbish with this 30 meters and you can just wash your hands. No, This is now real. So when you put divers on, you can be sure. Rolex does this anyways, because that's their internal standard, right? Even for a date, just to say 100 meters, we test it to 120. It's all good.
Which I don't. Who is diving 100 meters?
But this is the point of the oyster case, right? I mean, you started the oyster case for that very reason, because you wanted to do that and claim that you have the super water resistance. So go with it. And it's also one of the things that makes Rolex watches so robust, because there's nothing getting into the movement, right? There's nothing coming in the watch. You have the trip lock, dual lock, whatever system. So there's not much gunk and dust and other stuff getting into the movement, which also keeps the watch working longer, right? It is just a fact. Yep. Yeah, so that's that. And that's why I think Rolexes are absolutely cool. But the other watches with the ISO certification have also their benefits there.
Yeah, but now, once again, and in that, I don't know why my voice is going away. Excuse me. Somebody mentioned that I was at the mall yesterday, and at a specific mall, their voice would also get hoarse. They're saying it was the terrible air conditioning system, recirculating like I'm assuming very terrible air. But nonetheless, okay. So I think that's what happened yesterday. But nonetheless, point of story is, one of the things in that Watch You Seek forum, in that poll, people were saying, yes, I want a tool watch. I would like a dive tool watch. And people were saying the whole point of the Submariner was you beat the living bejesus out of it, right? That was the whole thing. But now it's become so flashy, and it's become so luxurious that you're not able to do that anymore. Either because you just physically cannot travel with it the way you once used to and put it through its paces. And secondly, because it's just too nice, right? You don't, you feel bad scratching it up now.
Yeah, that's a point. But
this becomes a kind of a downside of it. Meanwhile, you buy something else.
Yeah.
Like the Tudor, like the Seikos, and you get to live the equivalent of what the Submariner used to be, right?
So
when you could go anywhere with it.
What I'm always very fascinated by is that we have to actually force ourselves to mention the Omega Seamaster.
Oh, we will talk about it. Yeah,
because I think this is
necessary.
That is the Seamaster. The black dial, black bezel on the bracelet is the competitor to the Submariner.
Yeah.
And it's equally good. I mean, from everything you can say.
I would argue it's better. I
think, yeah, of course, you have the master chronometer certification. You have a ceramic dial.
And you have a helium escape valve, which you don't have on the Sub.
Yeah, helium escape valve. Even for the hardcore. It's like a stick shift.
Exactly. So
you do have a date, but no Cyclops. And the date is quite nicely centered at 6 o'clock. So it's actually, it fades away if you don't want to see it, basically. And you have options now without the date as well, right? You can buy certain watches.
But if you go without the date, you don't get the ceramic bezel.
True.
Which, of course, some people think is a good thing. Some people think we have to mention this, by the way, right? The ceramic bezel is unscratchable. However, it is breakable.
Yeah. But it's
so that's
rare.
The other thing.
It's not so easy.
It is.
You don't see that very often that people break them. It happens.
However, replacing a ceramic bezel on a Submariner is a $750 job, as opposed to replacing an aluminum bezel, which is like a $10 job. So,
yeah. What to say?
It's a huge difference.
The only thing that, of course, the Omegas have is they're a bit thicker. They are 100 meters more water resistant. They have the mass.
No, they're same.
300? Submariner is 300?
Yeah, it's 300. Submariner is 300 as well.
Okay. Then you have the slightly less power reserve, I think. The movement is, if I'm not mistaken, where is that? Is 55 or 60 hours of power reserve, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100% sure. 55 hours, yeah. It's a bit little, I feel, for a current watch. You have the micro adjustment in the clasp, which is nice. You have the diver extension, which nobody needs really. So it's a very good competitor. The price is also normal. It's lower than a Submariner, much lower.
By
actually.
about much lower, like a third lower.
And you can go in the shop and pick it up immediately without any
in a variety
waiting.
Of colors,
yes.
Any color you want.
Yes. So it is a beautiful alternative. I had this Seamaster, this version, just not in a two-tone and a blue dial. I also miss that watch a bit. Not as much as other watches, but I think it was a wonderful, beautiful watch, easy to wear. The only thing that I didn't like, which I hope they eventually will fix, is the bracelet. It didn't taper at all. Just make this bracelet taper at least a bit, so you increase the comfort level exponentially if you do. Just make it a bit more comfortable. Please, Omega, come on. You can do it.
And make it a little bit smaller, I think. I think 42 is very big.
Yeah, but
right?
it weighs...
Sub is 40.
Yeah, that's true.
41 now, they say.
Yeah, they could make it a bit smaller. What they do on the rubber strap, for example, which is also something that you can... The nice thing about these watches, you can change your strap easily, right? I mean, it's not a quick...
Which Rolexes you don't do?
Yeah, with the Rolex, they don't want you to do it. But here, for example, you even can buy plenty of different straps from Omega themselves. They encourage you to change your strap. And if you choose, for example, the rubber strap, which is very comfortable, you have a pin buckle and a very nice taper. So this is the opposite of... And this is what I don't understand.
I thought you had a very nice taper. You don't.
You don't. You do.
It's 8... No, it goes down to 18. I thought it went down to 16, but it doesn't. It goes from 20 to only 18, which I would prefer it to go down to 16.
Okay, but you can see the nice taper in the
it tapers.
It tapers nice, yeah. At least you have some.
Yes.
taper.
You have some taper, yeah, but I still think, going down, I think customary 4mm drop, that's what it should be.
Yeah, I agree with you. It just adds to the comfort. However, you also have to balance the watch sometimes, right? So just from a weight perspective, if it's too heavy,
it's a big head.
Yeah, and you have two-tone versions and I have gold versions of it, so it might sometimes need a bit more balancing there. But yeah, I still think it's a beautiful watch that doesn't get enough credit. People forget it.
Secondhand prices are nothing. I just saw one come up the other day for like 10,000 dirhams, which is nuts because the retail is like 20. So half price and it's like 2 years old.
Yes, absolutely. It is.
Which you can't do with a Rolex, of course. I've seen so many come up and I've been tempted so many times. But of course, the date window is what's really in my way. I have tried on now the new no date version.
Mm-hmm.
However, I still do feel that it is a big watch for me, and I would prefer it to be smaller.
Yeah, I agree. It is.
So now I see that they came out with a NATO strap version of the new one. So before they only had the rubber and the bracelet, the steel bracelet. Now it seems like they have a a NATO one.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that they in typical Omega fashion, I think it's I don't know where they're taking their playbook out of, but you remove the date, you remove I think the ceramic dial.
Yep.
You remove the ceramic bezel.
Yep.
So I think the dial is not anymore ceramic. The bezel is not anymore ceramic.
Everything's aluminum now.
And you remove the date and you put a NATO strap on it and you charge 200 pounds or
more than it would be otherwise.
Wait a second. Why? You know what? My biggest gripe, which is also the biggest one of the big identifying markers for this watch, is actually these what they're called scissor hands. I think they're called scissor hands. Or something, right?
No, they're called skeleton hands.
Yeah, I didn't like them. This is the one.
I like them. I think they're so cool.
I just felt like, oh, come on. Why don't you have just... I felt they're not as easy to distinguish from each other when I use the watch. I don't know why.
I never had one, so I don't know. But in pictures, I think it looks so cool because it looks different, right? It's not your traditional snowflake or Mercedes hand. It's something totally different. I do like it for that reason.
Yeah.
So I agree 100%. This is the primary alternative to getting
and I think also
a sub.
I think you could also say maybe even the Planet Ocean, right? The Seamaster.
I think the Planet Ocean is more of a alternative for the Sea Dweller.
Yes, especially with the ultra deep and all of the stuff. But if you look at, also there you have the crown guards, and it's just just a different way of doing things. What I also just find a bit funny is that you have two arrow hands. Why not just one?
Three if you count the second hand as well, because that's like a baby arrow.
So it's just like, okay,
So we used to have broad arrow hands, broad minute hands, and now we got both.
Yes. And then, of course, now you get the Seamaster Planet Ocean also as a world timer.
Because why not?
Yeah, look,
600 meters water resistance, and I want to know what time it is in New Delhi.
When I'm scuba diving, right, which I'm not, but I very often have thoughts, right, because you can't talk to other people. You're there with your own thoughts, and you think like, man, what is the time in Tokyo? I really need to know. And then with that watch, you can just look at your watch underwater and say, that's the time in Tokyo. You just wonder very often when you're diving, is it day or night in Moscow or in Karachi? That's what's important to you.
Yeah.
Especially when
you're 600 meters underwater.
Yeah. Or New York, Denver, Alaska, Samoa. Yeah. Whatever you have.
And once again, guys, we should mention that the actual limit of recreational scuba diving is... Let me see.
30, 40,
I don't want to say
meters?
the wrong thing. No, I think it's. What did you say? Sorry,
30, 40, 50 meters.
No,
less.
I think it's 14.
No, what?
Yeah, is the limit for a recreational diver.
Yeah, so that's why it's so important that you have the ultra deep 6,000 meters. It's important. So the Planet Ocean, I think it's a minimum 600, right? And then you have the 6,000 versions, and then you have the super duper ultra deep, and what is it? The other one, the not only oil.
Yeah.
But you also have chronograph versions of the Planet Ocean, right? And also important. You don't get this with the other ones.
So here's the certification depths.
Okay.
Open water, depends on who you're asking, goes to 12 meters, between 12 and 14 meters.
Okay.
Advanced diver gets you to 30.
Mm-hmm.
Deep diver gets you to 40. And then a technical diver goes below that.
Right.
So it is, once again, you're not going past most likely 14, 15 meters.
Of course you wouldn't. No.
Which is ironic because, when we say, and this is one of the things that I saw when I was looking at when I had the Oris Divers 65, which is the older version of the new Oris Diver, it was only 100-meter water resistance. And, I'm looking at my Explorer that has 100 meters. And I'm just like, this is supposed to be a dive watch and you can't do more than 100. And it does kind of bug me a little bit, right?
Yep.
So I do think the minimum, absolute minimum to call it a dive watch, even though ISO says 100 is suitable, I still think I would like to see 200 or more would be my preference.
Yes, I agree. And that's now I'm coming to my absolute last one that I need to mention, the new 50 Fathoms Automatique, relatively new, it's a few months old, right? 42 millimeters size, smaller than the 45 that was standard. Now in the permanent collection as a 42 millimeter watch. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant watch. Super nice to wear. You can get it with a steel bracelet. Yes, it's a bit more expensive than the Submariner, of course, but it's also a different level. 120 hours of power reserve with a 13-15 movement, a FPGA movement, based movement that is just absolutely stunning to look at. And you can see it. It's a transparent case back. You have a solid gold rotor on it. It's just absolutely amazing thing to look at. It's built together by a single watchmaker. It's absolutely no mass manufacturing involved in this. This is real nice horology, and it's a beautiful watch. I just find this watch absolutely stunning. If you want to spend a bit more money than the Submariner, do I still want to have a Submariner?
You didn't mention the Bathyscaphe. What about the Bathyscaphe?
Bathyscaphe, yeah, but I think if you're going with just a bit more affordable, but the Bathyscaphe still has an issue. I feel personally as a competitor is the size, because there you're also having either 38 millimeters, which was the ladies version, actually, or considered to be the ladies version. The other versions also are 43 millimeters. It's a bit big. But the Bathyscaphe, I had one. I love the watch. I miss it from time to time a lot. And this is also from a price perspective pretty close. But if you're going with a metal bracelet, then I think it's a bit more expensive. So you're closer to the Submariner. Again, better movement by far. Same amount of water resistance. You always have a date. Well, not always, but in most versions you have a date. So yeah, it's also Bathyscaphe as well. It's a 50 fathoms. And with the Bathyscaphe and with the normal 50 fathoms, you can knock yourself out if you want extra features. If you want a chronograph.
Yeah, you can get
want to have a moon phase.
Perpetual calendar.
Annual calendar. Whatever. Yeah, you can have everything. And Blancpain, again, is a manufacturer. You have different materials. You can have ceramic, titanium, steel, everything, right? So it's all there. Rubber straps, sailcloth straps, of course, the normal cool NATO straps. I mean, they have, I don't know how many variations of them, but you have, I think, 10 pages with 18 different versions.
And we have to say, by buying this, you are essentially not one of the sheep that have a Submariner, right? The millions and bajillions of people we saw in the Submariner book, how many Submariners were actually made.
Yeah.
And it's millions of Submariners are out there.
That is true.
So by getting a bathyscaphe, you're going to be in a much more rarefied era.
Oh, absolutely. And you, as I said, you can get the 38 millimeter version, the 5100B versions there with 38 millimeters. You get a different movement. It's the 1150 movement. 100 hours of power reserve, but equally great. I don't know what the water resistance is, though. I think it's also 300 meters. Yeah,
300 meters, and it's Submariner price.
Yeah, and you got a solid
but I
gold
think
rotor.
Isn't it titanium as well?
It depends. There are different versions of it, right? So you can have a steel version like this one.
This is steel, yeah. Okay.
And again, you have a case thickness of 10 millimeters or 10.8, so 11. It's nice for 38 millimeters for a dive watch with that kind of depth rating and a transparent case back. So it's pretty wearable. It's really, really lovely. Fully anti-magnetic, silicone hairspring, all of this stuff. You have the latest technology in the watch. It's just so much more orology for the money than you will get with a Submariner. However, the Submariner still has a bit more of that classic vibe, right? So it is what it is.
Yes. So once again, as I said, with my two Tudors, right? I have one that's leaning classic, one that's leaning modern. The Submariner cuts the two right in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's why it took two watches to replace the Submariner, essentially. But if you add up the value of these two watches, it's actually exactly what you would get a Submariner for. So the retail prices, of course. Now, one that you mentioned, the bathyscaphe, I'm going to immediately mention. I like this one. That one's nice.
Oh, sorry.
It was a limited edition. I don't know which limited edition it was.
Yeah.
But it was a no date.
It is a no date, and it has the numbers on it, right? 12, 3, 6,
I like.
and 9.
This looks very similar to the Hodinkee one.
Yeah.
Nice. But it's sold out. Who is this? Just a random limited edition?
I have no idea. The website from a lot of Swatch Group companies are atrocious.
Terrible.
They just don't give you any information. Where you think, why don't they actually talk a bit more about the watches, right? So
no,
it's just I don't know. I mean,
I do want to mention a few more because. There's a few that we haven't talked about. Quickly,
5 minutes.
I would like to mention the we talked about the Oris Diver 65. Just like Tudor, that's their vintage style. Now they call it the Divers. Now it became 200-meter water resistance. But they also have their modern version, which is the Oris Aquis. So that is a kind of Tudor style, both one vintage, one modern diver. So those could be a good alternative. We have Longines. They have the Hydro Conquest, which is their kind of modern diver. For the vintage one, they have their Legend Diver. So that's another one, with kind of similar vibes. The Glassute, whatever it's called. CQ. It's called the CQ.
Yes,
that's
the
what
CQ.
it is.
Yeah.
The CQ, that's also another fantastic watch. That one is, I would say, similar to the Blancpain because you are getting a better movement. You're getting a more rarefied watch for roughly the same exact price as the Submariner. And to choose the Glassute, I think it takes a special kind of person, right? To choose that over a sub for the same amount of money shows me that you kind of know what you're talking about. You like your
absolutely, and I think
wheeled and cooled watches.
I just,
watches.
As a public service announcement, I want to say that one of the two things that always made me choose the larger version of the CQ, right? Because there's two versions, right? There is the 39 millimeter version. I don't know where they are. Is this a Senator? Where's the CQ? In which collection is it? It's these websites.
It's by itself. It's a CQ.
But when there should be a collection.
Did they discontinue it?
No. I'm sure they didn't.
Because it hasn't been updated in freaking forever.
So see, they have to even. No, it has been updated just recently. Specialist. Okay, specialist collection. Fine. Okay, so we have this new chronograph version, for example, with a panorama date, which is new. So they have updated certain things. So they had the panorama version of the CQ, panorama date version of the CQ with a big date, 43 millimeters, which I always found the best version because you see this beautiful case back. And then you have the normal version, right? Let's look at the normal version in comparison.
The small one.
Which is the small one, 39 millimeters, right? Again, price is interesting.
I like the small one better.
And now the small one has a transparent case back, which they didn't do before. So that is new. And the best thing is, if you own the old one, you can order the new case back and put it on your old watch. Cool. So that's really thoughtful. And I think that's fantastic because a lot of people said, I do like the smaller one. I just don't like that I can't see this movement, especially the Glashütte movements are really nice to see with the snailing and the nice decoration that they do. So why don't you show it to us? In this case, you now can actually see it. And that means there's no reason anymore to not go for the smaller one. Unless, of course, you need 100 hours of power reserve, then you need to go to the big one because the small one doesn't have that. It still has a 40-hour power reserve.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, still, we're missing the GLC Polaris. Also, historically, dive watch came out in the 60s, had vibrating, the memory feature, the timer, right? But the GLC Polaris is leaning heavily into the vintage vibes, so it might not be a Submariner alternative as such.
Yeah,
but it roughly costs the same, and that's an option.
For me, the problem with the Polaris, and I had it so many times on my wrist in the boutiques or at the airport, I always liked it, but I never loved it. You know what I mean? It's just the last
I'm 100% the same way.
That you think, the 42 millimeters. And I always felt like, okay, there's a couple of things that I never liked. One is that there is no screw down crown for the internal rotating bezel. So you knock on your little crown, the two crown system, right? One is for the internal rotating bezel. And then you knock it and you change it. Yeah. Is it super easy to do that? No, but in normal activity, like you put your hand in your jeans pocket or something, you will probably twist it somewhat. So that's one of the things. And I think some versions now have a screw down thing for that, but I'm not 100% sure. That was one of the things. Then, of course, the two crowns, you have to live with that if you like it or not.
I like it. I think it's cool.
Yeah, it's obviously
different. It's different, right?
Yeah, it's different. Then what I also found terrible, really terrible, was actually when you looked at the movement. That was something which I found
disgusting.
Not disgusting, but it's something.
I didn't care. It was small.
It is just small, and it's made even smaller with the way they actually integrated it, because they give you a nice, big, transparent case back, and then have this big spacer in it. See here?
I don't see because you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, shit. Let me show that to you. Share this one. So this is a Pelagos.
A Pelagos.
Sorry, a Polaris, GLC Polaris. And you have the small movement, and then you have this big chunk of metal here. And there are other manufacturers who also have a smaller movement, like AP and others, who just somehow manage to make it look bigger.
Would you like to know what the lug width on this is and what the taper on the strap is?
Yeah,
and
I would really like to know.
21 millimeter lugs, the worst of all. And it tapers down to, guess what? 20 millimeters.
Ooh.
How? A 1 millimeter taper. Why?
Half a millimeter on each side.
Why would you do that? I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense to say, like, you might as well just say, I don't want to taper anymore. Like, why would you do a 1 millimeter taper? Yeah. It's a waste of space. But nonetheless, okay.
For the optics. But
now,
it is
the last one.
But it is a fantastic watch. Just from the movement is great. 70 hours power reserve.
Of course.
It is a lovely watch, and it's a JLC.
It is. So, it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just. I've wanted to buy it before, and it always somehow turned me off, because you could get them super great deals on the secondhand market, right?
Absolutely.
15,000 dirhams you can get them for.
Yeah. sometimes less.
Which is nuts for a JLC.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing I want to talk about today is one brand that we haven't talked about yet it was the first dive watch that I bought. Tag Heuer and their Aqua Racer line.
Yes, that's a good point.
So I had the Aqua Racer 500, which was the 500 meter version of it, which is, of course, no longer made. But that watch was super thin.
Yeah.
And it was, at the time, claimed to be the thinnest 500 meter dive watch on the market.
Yep.
Or if not ever. I'm not sure if there was something else thinner before then. But now we're seeing a lot of other things that are coming out that are super thin or relatively very thin with insane water ratings, depth ratings. So this one was always cool. Now they're back up to 300. It is, in my opinion, if you were to take the Seamaster 300M and the Submariner and they had a baby, this is what would come out.
Yeah.
The bezel is very, a Seamaster, and then the dial depends on which dial you're going for. These have kind of lines. It's just, Yeah. Some have circles. The circles look very Submariner-y. They even put Cyclopses on them for a while.
Yeah,
I don't know if they're still doing that.
I'm not so sure. Yeah, they do.
Right there. They still have one on some.
Yeah. So let's have a look at this one, for example. We have the Aqua Racer Diving, which is funny for a diving watch to call it, or a diver's watch to call it a diving, Aqua Racer Diving. But this is one 300 meters date version with a Cyclops. Let me check what kind of...
Is there one without a date? Because I don't think there is. So why would they put date in the... I didn't see one without a date.
Wait a second. I just wanted to see which kind of movement they put in there. Oh, the TH31. That is an 80-hour power reserve movement. It's not a Powermatic 80. This is a development that they have done together with, I think, AMT. So that's the specialist movement arm from AMT, from Celita, right? AMT. So that's a cool movement. It's not fully in-house, but it's manufactured for Tag Heuer exclusively with AMT. So you have also a absolute standard movement with chronometer certification. So absolute perfect. I think that's what you want from a modern dive watch. 80 hours power reserve. I think it's 5 years warranty, 10 years power service intervals.
It's a good looking watch.
It's great, right? You don't see the movement because it's a closed case back, as most of the Aqua Racers have. I think all of them. Then you have the older versions, right? 40 millimeters. Here I have a two-tone version that I'm just showing.
Once again, date.
Yeah, a date, but no Cyclops. And it has the older, in brackets, caliber 5
The caliber
movement.
5, which was the Celita 200.
Or ETA 2824.
They switched from ETA to Celita back in 2015. So it's going to be a Celita.
And then, of course, also a relatively new one that was just announced, I think, last year is the Solargraph, right? The Aqua Racer Solargraph, I think 2013, the first Solargraph came out. Also a lovely, lovely watch with that La Jouperet movement, which is basically based on the Citizen Echo Drive, just with made in Switzerland, so that they can actually have a Swiss-made watch. That's why the movement has to come from Switzerland.
Now, once again, I task you, they say date for everything, but where is the no date?
Yeah, I don't know. Let me see.
Why are they putting date on the name of the watch if they don't have a no date version?
Yeah, let me see if there is a no date version. Let me go for all.
Whoa.
Because
there's an Aqua Racer diving, and then there's an Aqua Racer outdoor.
Yeah. Because when you dive, you could technically dive indoor, right?
Yeah, of course. They do have those.
Okay,
I don't think. Go to Aqua Racer diving.
Let me go all watches, Aqua Racer. All watches. Now I'm going to filter, and let me see if I can choose if it has a by some kind of
movement.
No, that's just time, dial color, strap, case material, price, not by complication. So let's quickly scroll through here and see everything has a date. Even they have a GMT. No, that.
Yeah, they've had a GMT for a long time. Yeah.
GMT version. Everything has a date. Oh, there. I know. Even the chronograph has a date.
They had those
12.
the big date.
Ooh,
Yeah, at 12.
There we go. 40 millimeters, no date. Boom.
Click it.
I click it. It's
quartz or not?
Tag Heuer. This is probably quartz because it looks, quartz.
Okay.
It's
right,
just
so
quartz, 40 millimeters, no date.
Yeah, okay. No, I just wanted to know if they kept putting date, if there was actually a no date.
There is one.
So there is. Okay.
So there is actually quite a few, also in 30 millimeters, 40 millimeters. Yeah, okay, that's it. And I think other than that, we do not see Aquaracer Professional also with date everywhere and the Cyclops. I think that's about it. Also, I must admit, the Aquaracer, my wife has one in two-tone. It's a very nice women's female watch, right? It's really lovely. A lot of ladies really like the Aquaracer, coming with different diamonds on it and different bezels, two-tone versions. They're pretty cool for also the ladies.
I like the Night Diver. What is it called? The Night Diver? Is that what it is?
Yes, that's a cool one.
That's a cool one.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a very cool one. Yeah. But all right, okay. Moving on. The last. I was going to say this is the last brand, but there is one more brand.
One more brand. What is it?
That is synonymous with diving that we forgot about. Hazard a guess?
We have mentioned Seiko, no?
Yeah. So Seiko, by the way, we should say, okay, there's more than just the Seikos we talked about. There is Citizen also, but that is not what I'm talking about.
Citizen
What is,
Pro Diver?
if you put in diving, I'll give you one hint. Jacques Cousteau.
Diving watch.
Jacques Cousteau.
Jacques Cousteau, yeah.
No?
I know Jacques Cousteau. He's a big fan.
Yeah, but you don't know what I'm talking about.
Oh, Squale?
No, Doxa.
Yeah, but Squale is also very, very famous for.
Yeah, Squale is too. But Doxa, I think, is the one. Remember, Doxa was the first dive watch available for.
But you know what?
Recreational divers.
But you know what? When
publicly available.
When we started this and saying like, hey, we want to have a replacement for the Submariner.
Yeah.
As Doxa just. For me, just doesn't, because the look is so removed from it.
It is so different. However, I think if you are diving,
then definitely.
Then it does that for you.
If that's
right?
the main purpose of the Submariner, 100% agree.
Well, isn't that what the main purpose of the Submariner is? Is a dive watch?
No, it's not even a diver's certified watch, sir.
Yeah, it's a luxury watch, right? So you get a point. You got a point for that one.
No, it's a tool watch for sure. And you can dive with it, 100%. But it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the traditional Doxas, the sub 300s, the sub 300Ts, these are strange looking watches. I think most people will agree. They're the huge cushion case. But then they have the 200, right? And so these are... a little bit more traditional in their look, but to me, they're not traditional Doxas, right? If you're going to get a Doxa, you get the ridiculous cushion case.
The 200, I mean, for $1,000, the sub 200, it's a lovely watch, different colors. It's a summer watch like we had in the last episode, really, right? Mm-hmm. It's
for sure.
It's nice. It's playful, it's robust, it's reliable. I think in most of them you have the same Celita movements, I guess, that everybody puts in, right? Which is not a bad thing.
Yep. No, it's not at all. But I think, once again, if we're saying we cannot say diving without talking about Doxa.
Yeah,
so therefore we talked about Doxa.
Good point.
But I think that, yes, is it a one-to-one replacement for a Submariner? No, it's not. Unless you're an actual diver that is using it for... squale, not squalene.
It's not that auto completed into some medicine. Squalene.
Squale, also hugely popular in diving.
And a lot of history in this brand. It's just incredible of how much
good
history
Italian, honest pizza
1959.
History.
They make watches since forever, diving watches. And I still do like their traditional design with the blue and the orange minute hand. Yeah, they're nice. They're nice. Yeah, and they're just the entire brand is like Doxa.
It's diving.
That's it.
Exactly. Both are entirely diving, which I think is super cool. Mm-hmm. So, on that bombshell, I think that we've talked about tons of different alternatives.
If you don't find
if you don't want a sub.
Yeah, if you don't find any of the ones that we mentioned of proper replacement of a sub, let us know. which one you would choose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
We are empty.
Okay.
That's it for today.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.